Pleasure to welcome you. Thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. Can we go around and just say names and maybe start with Sienna.
Angelica.
Angelica. Lorraine.
Yeah.
Yaya. Monica.
Jacobsen.
Jesselyn.
Janelle.
Janelle. Takara. Brittany. Samantha. Jordan. Sonia. Okay, I will try my best to remember all those names.
Don't quit.
Okay. Should I test it? Yes. Okay, good. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here. So my name is Sara Jacobsen, and I consider myself a natural fertility guide, and sometimes I call myself a fertility shaman and a fertility priestess. So I just want to take a few moments to kind of ground all of us. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little ungrounded right now, a little nervous. So let's go ahead and close our eyes and just take a couple deep breaths. If you feel called, let a sigh out at the end. Allowing the past session, talking about racism and racial inequality. Just letting that kind of give a little kiss to that last session, a little thank you. And opening up to holistic fertility, to preconception, to the very start of all of this, where this all comes, creation. The marriage between the masculine and the feminine in service to creation. And remembering why we're here, which is to serve women. I'm thanking God, Goddess Spirit, for this opportunity today to learn.
Blessed be. So, let's talk about fertility and infertility. So, is infertility really a big problem here in the US? The answer is yes. Infertility is a big problem. 1 in 10 couples of reproductive age struggle with infertility here in the US. 10 to 15% of reproductive age females have endometriosis here in the US. And between 10 and 5% of reproductive age females have polycystic ovarian syndrome here in the US. And then between 20 and 30% of infertility patients receive a diagnosis of unexplained infertility. So the main causes of infertility are endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and then unexplained infertility. So let's talk a little bit about Western medicine's approach to treating infertility. So let's talk about endometriosis first. So a Western medical doctor, if a Woman comes in with endometriosis, typically they will treat her with synthetic hormones. So either they'll give her a birth control, or they'll give her synthetic progesterone, or they'll give her medication to kick her into pseudo-menopause if she doesn't want babies, or they'll look at surgery, either full removal of all of the reproductive organs or partial removal of the reproductive organs. And then we might also look into immunology, testing for allergies, having her see a rheumatologist, something like that. And there's a couple problems with some of these approaches, right? So right off the bat,
giving a woman birth control pills if she has endo and she wants to get pregnant is really not going to help her get pregnant right off the bat. And then some of these birth control pills also cause further problems with fertility. So if we look at the IUD, the Mirena, one of the side effects is it increases the risk of ovarian cysts and it increases the risk of PID, which is pelvic inflammatory disease. And both of these can lead to infertility. So some of these treatments for endometriosis cause further problems with fertility. And then, of course, kicking a woman into pseudomenopause, that's not going to help her have a baby. These are all really just quick fixes. So now let's go to polycystic ovarian syndrome. And actually, let me backtrack a little bit. So what is endometriosis? So endometriosis is when a woman has too high estrogen levels in her body. And what will actually happen is that the endometrium lining, the lining of the uterus, will start to grow outside of her uterus. And that causes scar tissue, and that can be a major contributor to infertility. And then polycystic ovarian syndrome, so that's when a woman has too high testosterone levels. And she can have cysts on her ovaries, but she doesn't have to. Really, just a hallmark for PCOS is when her testosterone is too high. And again, that's another leading cause of infertility. And so what a Western medical doctor would do to treat that, they would say, well, lose weight, because there is sometimes a connection between developing PCOS and being overweight, but not all women. I was diagnosed with PCOS 3 years ago, and I was quite thin at the time. And I've known other women who've been quite thin who have been diagnosed with PCOS. They would also look to giving her a medication like metformin. Metformin helps regulate blood sugar levels. Because what happens is when the blood sugar is constantly high in the body, that converts to insulin. And then when insulin is constantly high in the body and is not able to be absorbed into the muscle cells, what happens is that converts to testosterone. So that's the relationship between irregular blood sugar levels and having too high testosterone in the body. And then they would also look to putting a woman on birth control to try to regulate her hormones. So now let's talk about unexplained infertility. So how a Western medical doctor would treat a woman with unexplained infertility if she were to go to a medical doctor to get treatment. So the first thing they probably do is they put her on an ovarian stimulation medication called clomiphene. And what that does, it releases more than one egg during a woman's ovulation. So the idea is if she has more than one egg in her uterus, perhaps she can get pregnant on her own. The other thing they might do is they would combine clomiphene with IUI. And IUI is basically a syringe. And so when a woman is ovulating, they would take a little bit of semen and they would put that in that syringe and they would dilate the cervix and they would insert the semen into the cervix and into the uterus. So that's another option, what they would give her. And then there's IVF. And IVF is basically you have a woman on an ovarian stimulation medication like clomiphene, and then what you do is when she's ovulating, you harvest as many eggs as possible. You look to see which eggs are viable, and then the reproductive endocrinologist actually creates embryos. So they will take the eggs that are viable, and they'll take the woman's partner's sperm or maybe some other sperm, create an embryo in a petri dish, and then when she's ovulating next time, they'll actually insert the embryo inside of her. So that's IVF. And so there's a couple problems with this system. So clomiphene, which is a very popular ovarian stimulation medication, it's used off-label for usage as an ovarian stimulation medication, and it's not FDA approved to use as an ovarian stimulation medication. And there's actually not a whole lot of research about the safety of using clomiphene in particular. And also, a lot of these ovarian stimulation medications, they can lead to serious health conditions. It's quite rare, but when it happens, it's very serious. It's called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. It's a very serious condition where the ovaries go into hyperdrive, and there's excess fluid in the body, and it's very painful, and you often have to go to the hospital and have that fluid drained out of you, and it's very serious, and it's a side effect of taking an ovarian stimulation medication. And then the other problem with IVF, in addition to it not being all that safe, is that it's not all that effective. So if we look at V11, I want to talk to you a little bit about where I got these stats. So I got these stats from the Society of Assisted Reproductive Technology. This is an independent organization, and 95% of the fertility clinics here in the US are a member of SART, member of the Society for Assisted Reproductive Technology. And about once a year, they gather data from all of the member clinics. So, thousands and thousands and thousands of data is what they have. And they look at averages. They look at how many women have birth to at least one baby, how many women have birth to 2 babies with IVF. So they're looking at the success rate of IVF. And the stats I have here for V11, this comes from START's data from 2015, so from 2 years ago. And let's talk about this. So for women under 35, she has a 48.2% chance of giving birth to a baby. For women 35 to 37, she has a 35.3% chance of giving birth to a baby. For women 38 to 40, she has a 22.4% chance of giving birth to a baby with IVF. And women 41 to 42, she has a 10.6% chance of giving birth to a baby. So I don't know about you, but I think these stats suck. I mean, look at it. If you're a young woman, you have less than half chance of giving birth to a baby. And what's happening now is a lot of these fertility clinics are actually misleading women. So they're saying that they're quoting SART statistics, but they're not. And what's really interesting is a couple days ago, I saw a fertility clinic try to be a little sneaky. So they had an infographic about their success rates, and they compared it to 2015 SART data, but they actually misquoted SART's data. They said for the women that were under 35, the chances were 56%, and they completely misquoted it. And I was kind of like, okay, what's going on here? Is this an error? Or is this actually intentionally misleading women? So there's a lot of with a lot of the fertility clinics, there's a lot of kind of sneaky stuff that happens and a lot of conflating about what the success rate is. And then I want to talk about, this is kind of related to fertility, but I want to talk about egg freezing for a little bit. So what's happening now is a lot of these clinics are getting really hip to the fact that women, especially in corporate America, are wanting to have a baby at some point, but maybe they're not ready yet, and maybe they're in their mid-30s and they haven't met their partner yet. And so they're getting really hip to that, and they're offering a service called egg freezing. And what a lot of these clinics are offering is they have little parties. So they'll have wine and cheese, and it's networking, and it's a lot of fun. And then they'll extol the virtues of egg freezing. They talk about its amazing insurance policy, and you're doing this to kind of safeguard your fertility in the future. So when you're 40 or whatever and want to have a baby, well, the problem with that is a couple things. So first of all, this technology of egg freezing is really, really new. So we actually don't have a ton of data to show how effective it is, but the data we do have is actually not that great. So egg freezing is not the insurance policy that a lot of these companies are selling to women. SART, Society of Assisted Reproductive Technology, says statistics for egg freezing success rate per frozen egg is between 2 and 12%. This is for all ages combined. So that's a pretty low success rate per egg harvested. And then the meta-analysis data shows a 75 to 76% failure rate for women age 30. So when I say that, I mean it's a failure rate in the sense of women who harvest their eggs at age 30 and then use those eggs later to undergo IVF. There's a 75 to 76% failure rate. And then for women who harvest their eggs when they're 40 and they try to have IVF maybe a couple years later, there's a 90% failure rate. of that egg and that sperm being able to create an embryo. And then again, we have just a really small sample size. It's a very new technology. Only about 200 babies have been born from frozen eggs. So that's also something that's going on. Okay, let's talk about why all these options are really just not that great. Okay, so first of all, side effects. A lot of these options have serious side effects. The artificial hormones have side effects. Again, we talked about ovarian hyperstimulation with clomiphene, which is an ovarian stimulation medication. Some of these medications can cause cysts and pelvic inflammatory disease. And they're not healing or addressing the deeper emotional, spiritual, energetic, and physical reasons why she developed endometriosis, why she developed polycystic ovarian syndrome, and why she developed unexplained infertility. They're really just trying to put a Band-Aid on the situation. It also robs women of the opportunity to take a proactive role in their emotional, spiritual, and physical health. It robs women of the opportunity to heal from trauma. It's very expensive. It's often not that effective. We talked about the success rates. And it's often not effective for women when they get pregnant. So putting a woman with endometriosis on a birth control pill, that's not going to help her get pregnant or kick her into pseudomenopause. Often not that effective. You know, we talked about the IVF success rates and the egg freezing success rate. And then also, this is one that, you know, we don't talk about a lot, but for a survivor of sexual trauma, having IVF or IUI can be very re-traumatizing. So that's another issue as well. Okay, so let's talk about some holistic options for endometriosis, PCOS, and unexplained infertility. So the first holistic option for endometriosis is looking at changing the diet a little bit. There's a couple foods that are estrogen promoting, which we can eliminate from the diet. Dairy, even organic dairy, is estrogen promoting. So getting rid of all dairy is really helpful. Getting rid of beans. Beans are a little bit estrogen promoting. Soy, flaxseed. If you're going to eat meat, have it be always organic vegetables. Limit the intake of fish. Fish have been shown to have high levels of a pollutant called dioxin. And I'll talk about dioxin in a little bit. But there's a link between dioxin and endometriosis. Okay, ditch conventional tampons and pads. Conventional tampons and pads have this toxin, dioxin. And the reason why they have this toxin is because of how cotton is grown here in the U.S. So conventional cotton is grown with pesticides, and these pesticides have dioxin in it. And they've done a couple different studies to show a link between dioxin and endometriosis. One of the most interesting studies that I found comes from the 70s, where they took female rhesus monkeys and they isolated the toxin dioxin, and they actually inserted it into her uterus, and they wanted to see what would happen. And the majority of the rhesus monkeys who had the isolated toxin called dioxin inserted into their uteruses developed endometriosis. So we've had some studies with monkeys and some other studies to show that link between dioxin and endometriosis. So ditch conventional tampons and pads and start using reusable menstrual cups. You can use a Diva cup, which is made out of medical grade silicone. You can use cloth pads. You can use organic tampons and pads. And all of these are readily available at the health food store. Diva cups are at the health food store. Organic tampons and pads are at the health food store, so readily available. And then only organic fruit and veg. Limit exposure to BPA through plastics. This is an interesting one. Drink reverse osmosis water to reduce exposure. So our city tap water has all kinds of stuff in it, right? It has pollutants, environmental pollutants, and it also has pharmaceuticals in it. Small traces of pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals get into the water system. And, you know, what's a pharmaceutical? Birth control. So in my research, I've found that even some women who switch to drinking only reverse osmosis water, sometimes that's enough to get pregnant, because those small doses of birth control pill that you have in the water is just enough to keep her from getting pregnant. So as far as reverse osmosis water, there's a couple. Oh, do you have a question?
Yeah. Do you know what a burpee is supposed to say?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yeah. That's enough. Yeah. So a couple options. You can use a Berkey, and a Berkey is pretty affordable. It's a couple $100s. It's a tabletop model, and that filters out environmental pollutants and fluoride and all of that. Other options are you can go to the health food store and bring the big jugs of water, like Whole Foods, and go to the water machine. And then the more expensive option is getting a reverse osmosis system in the entire house, but that's quite expensive. So Berkey, you're going to a health food store, the most effective, cost effective. Yeah, it's Berkey, I believe. Yeah, if you Google Berkey reverse osmosis, you'll get it. And they were having this issue for a while that they wouldn't ship to California. I think that has been resolved. I think they're a U.S. based company, but I would just check in about that. Okay, so any more questions? Okay, great. So also looking into taking biphasic herbs, especially for women dealing with hormonal imbalances, taking biphasic herbal remedies are better than taking the same herbal remedy the whole time. And the reason is you can customize it. So you can take one herbal remedy that's going to support estrogen in the first part of your cycle, and then the other herbal remedy that's going to support progesterone. So examples of biphasic is you could take an herb called Vitex in the first part of your cycle, so cycle day 1 to 14, and then after you ovulate, so maybe like day 16 to 28, you could take an herb like Tribulus, which helps with progesterone. And then also another great way to tackle endometriosis is taking herbs that support the liver. So the liver is the filter for everything in the body. It's the filter for the food we take, the pharmaceuticals we ingest, everything, the hormones. And so if you can take some herbs to support the liver, that's going to help the liver release excess estrogen from the body.
What was the progesterone herb after
Tribulus, I think I have it listed here. I might have it listed under PCOS. Tribulus is Tribulus.
Okay.
Actually, wait a second. No, I'm getting that confused with a different herb. Tribulus is for lowering testosterone. A good herb for progesterone would be like Dong Quai. Dong Quai is a Chinese herb, and that can help with progesterone. So, like, for example, of a biphasic would be like Vitex from day 1 to 14. You know, Vitex combined with like dandelion or milk thistle, combined with like a liver herb, and then from day like 16 to 28, you could take Dong Quai and another liver herb, something like that. That'd be an example of a very basic biphasic. Yeah. Okay, so 1V. Heal underlying sexual trauma stored in the reproductive organs. You can heal this through somatic psychology, shamanism, angels, goddesses, etc. So there's been some interesting studies that have come out recently. And this is something that shamans and healers have known for a really long time, that trauma from our experiences, our emotions can be stored in the body. And finally, science is kind of catching up to this. So in a study published in 2012 in Fertility and Sterility magazine, research collected data from a cohort of nurses ages 25 to 42. From this cohort of nurses, 65% reported at least one experience of sexual trauma in their lifetime, and women who self-reported at least one act of violence against them were 13% at a greater risk of developing endometriosis. So there is a little bit of a connection between sexual trauma and developing endometriosis. And then later we'll talk about the link between sexual trauma and developing PCOS. So it's important to support women in healing that and addressing that. And then allow the goddess to heal you through ritual. So this is what I did. I mean, I haven't talked about my story, but I was diagnosed with infertility and PCOS, and I worked with a goddess named Oshun. She's a goddess from Nigeria. And she healed me of PCOS and infertility. So doing ritual with the goddess is actually a really powerful thing. And women from all over the world have been doing rituals to their local goddesses for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And so I give a couple examples here. So I talked about Oshun just now. So for 10,000 plus years, every year there's a festival for the goddess Oshun that happens in Nigeria. And women from all over Nigeria, even from all over the world, flock to the sacred waters of the goddess Oshun, and they wash their bodies with her water. And if they want a baby, they ask for a baby from the goddess Oshun. If they want material wealth, or because she's also the goddess of wealth and beauty and all of these things. Yeah. And another example is Mother Earth in the Hindu tradition, Bhumi Devi. I'm probably saying that wrong. So women in India, if they're struggling to get pregnant, they can go to their local temple and order a puja. A puja is a ritual in devotion to the Earth Mama, the Earth Goddess, Bhumi Devi. And Bhumi Devi is a manifestation of Lakshmi, and she's connected to fertility. And then another connection of working with the goddess in ritual is the indigenous people of Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and Russia. They're called the Sami people. They're considered the only indigenous European group by the United Nations. There are still people who are, 100% blood Sami or half Sami, and they're called the reindeer people. So maybe you've heard of the term the reindeer people. Yeah. And in the Sami tradition, what they used to do, and they still do now, is if a woman wants to have a baby, she'll actually first consult the Sami shaman. And the Sami shaman will connect with grandmother goddess Mother Akka. And grandmother goddess will actually petition the client's ancestors and ask the client's ancestors for the blessing and the permission for her to have a baby. So this happens even before she gets pregnant, even when she's just thinking she wants to get pregnant. The ancestors and this goddess and the shaman are consulted. And then I want to talk a little bit about ancient Greece. So in ancient Greece, the goddess Demeter, she's connected with fertility in the crops, fertility of the land, but also fertility in a woman's body. And there was a popular 3-day festival called Thesmophoria. I'm probably saying that wrong. And that used to happen in October. And it was a very popular festival, 3-day festival. And on the third day, women would call upon the goddess Kalengelia, and they would pray for their own fertility. And then I just wanted to list a couple of these indigenous fertility goddesses. So Nua Kua, she's a fertility goddess from China. She's considered to be the mother goddess, and she created the sky. So a lot of images of her are of her creating the sky. And Pachamama in Peru. We have Tsiva in Russia. Of course, we talked about Oshun, and we haven't talked about Yemoja, but she's also connected with fertility. She's also a fertility goddess from Nigeria. And Asherah, the Hebrew goddess from Israel. Alat, which is an Arabic goddess from Saudi Arabia. Lilith from Iraq. There were certain aspects of Lilith and certain cults that were connected to fertility in women, and others that weren't as connected to fertility in women. Aphrodite, Venus, and then Mother Mary, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so I want to talk about the underlying thoughts and emotions around endometriosis. So Louise Hay, the fabulous Louise Hay, says in her You Can Heal Your Life book that the probable cause of endo is thoughts and feelings of insecurity, disappointment, frustration, and then also replacing self-love with sugar. She says a lot of women who have endo do that. And then there's a blaming, the energy of blaming. And then a new thought pattern that women who have endometriosis, a new thought pattern they can think and feel and embody on their healing process is going to be, I am both powerful and desirable. It's wonderful to be a woman. I love myself and I am fulfilled. And other ways to heal naturally from endometriosis include yoga, meditation, and chanting. Asking your ancestors and spirit guides to show you how to heal naturally from endometriosis. Healing through a modality called body talk. Body talk is a really cool modality. I don't do it myself, but I receive it. And it's where you talk to different organs in the body. You say, what's going on? Do you need to release a memory? Do you need a particular herb? Do you need a particular essential oil? It's actually really very cool healing modality. And then address any underlying relationships to the divine feminine. And then lastly, I want to talk about, so this idea of endometriosis is this uncontrolled growth, right? The endometrial layer is growing and growing and growing. So another interesting question to ask a woman with endo is, what areas of your life do you feel out of control? What areas are just going crazy and you don't have any control over that? So that's another kind of interesting point of healing for women with endo. Okay, so let's talk about natural healing of polycystic ovarian syndrome. So again, what PCOS is, it's a dysregulation of blood sugar, which leads to excess insulin, which leads to high testosterone, okay? And there's a couple ways to keep the blood sugar regulated. There's an herb from India called Gymnema sylvestri, and there's also an herb called berberine. Berberine is not a great option if your client or yourself, whoever has PCOS, deals with depression. So that wouldn't be the first line of defense. Gymnema sylvestri would be a better option. And also taking digestive enzymes before each meal, that can be helpful to regulate blood sugar. And then avoiding certain foods that will spike your blood sugar. So things that are sweet. Oh, go ahead.
Digestive enzymes like what?
Licorice or salad like amylase. So basically in our bodies, the first point of digestion is in our mouth with salivary amylase. And what they've done is certain digestive enzymes is they have taken that enzyme and they've isolated it and put it into supplements. So yeah, either something like licorice or a digestive enzyme that has isolated amylase. Okay, so avoiding certain foods, so anything that's been sweetened, dried fruit, high glycemic index foods, that's really important to avoid. Some people, white rice and white potatoes is a good idea to avoid. And then eating only small amounts of animal protein. So this is kind of interesting. So animal protein can help regulate the blood sugar if you eat small amounts, but if you eat too much of it, it actually spikes your blood sugar. So it's important to eat just small amounts. We talk about with the palm of the hand, just really small amounts of animal protein. And then also, if you're going to eat animal protein, it's important to eat it with vegetables and eat it as a whole meal because the vegetables actually will help regulate the blood sugar as well. And then avoiding an inflammatory food. So avoiding gluten, avoiding dairy, avoiding sugar. Sometimes grains are difficult for people to digest, avoiding processed foods, avoiding processed oils. And then, as I just said, always eating protein with a vegetable, a fruit, and a fat. Do not eat fruit alone, and try not to eat protein by itself as well. And then, this is really interesting. So V1, think about incorporating a food such as chula bud. So I want to talk about what is this chula bud thing. This was so cool. I was in Arizona. And I went to this farmer's market, and they have a Native American food co-op at this farmer's market. It's called the San Xavier Food Co-op. And I was looking, and they were explaining to me what some of the food items were that they were offering. And they actually grow foods that are indigenous to their people, their Native American tribe. And they have this one indigenous food called chula bud, Choola, chula bud. What it is it's a cactus. And if you boil it for at least an hour, between an hour and a half, it gets a little bit soft. It gets kind of like a hard artichoke heart. That's kind of like the flavor of it. But what it does is it naturally regulates blood sugar. And so when I found out about that, I was like, this is so cool. So I had to pick it up. So it's a great way to, anytime you're eating something, you can put some of these little chula buds, and they look like they're small. They kind of are oval shaped, and they look kind of like a cactus. So you can have that as a side dish while you're eating all of your meal to help regulate your blood sugar. And what this food co-op is doing is they're trying to get some of these indigenous foods back into Native American people's diet. So think about how many Native Americans have diabetes, right? So if you can incorporate a food like this that helps regulate blood sugar, that's going to be a godsend. And you can buy it at this website called sanxaviercoop.org. And they ship all over the U.S. And then V11, take herbs that support the liver in releasing excess testosterone. So again, the liver is this organ that is the filter system of our body, liver and kidneys. And so if you can take a herb to support the liver to filter, then that will help release excess testosterone. And then tribulus. This is a great herb for women who have PCOS because it helps minimize testosterone in a woman's body. And you can find tribulus on Amazon, on Whole Foods, anywhere. It's pretty easy to find. Lose weight if you need to lose weight. And then again, heal the deeper emotions, heal the trauma, heal the sexual trauma. So I found a while ago, I found an interesting survey that was done. It was done by an independent research team, and they surveyed thousands of women who had been recently diagnosed with PCOS. And they asked them all kinds of questions. They asked them, what's your age? Are you married? Do you have kids? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they also asked these women if they had had some type of sexual trauma or sexual abuse in their lifetime. And 70%, 70, reported that at least one time in their life they had experienced sexual trauma. So with PCOS, there is that relationship between sexual trauma and developing PCOS. And then heal the relationship with the feminine and the masculine. So let's think about this here. Testosterone is a male hormone, right? And then you can think about it. So she's running too much male hormone. Maybe she's running too much masculine energy in her life. Maybe she's go, go, go in her career, in her family life. Maybe she's over giving. Maybe she's not allowing herself to rest and receive and feel nourished. So that's another opportunity to kind of examine that. And again, so do ritual work with the goddess. That's another way to heal from polycystic ovarian syndrome, like I did with the goddess Oshun. Okay, so now let's talk about unexplained infertility. So what are some ways to heal naturally from unexplained infertility? So the thing about unexplained infertility is you have to be a little bit of a sophisticated diagnostician, okay? Because there's a lot of different reasons why she could have infertility. There's physical health reasons, emotional reasons, spiritual reasons, energetic reasons, ancestral reasons. So there's a lot of different things happening. So you have to be a really good diagnostician. So let's talk about some of the kind of physical stuff. So she could have a nutrient deficiency. What happens is when a woman is on birth control long term, she ends up having deficiencies in trace minerals. And so looking at the micronutrient ratio is really important, and you can do that through blood tests. And then she might have heavy metal toxicity. So especially with, so many people have metal fillings, right? And that can lead to high levels of mercury in the body. So you want to look at that. Also, high levels of environmental pollutants. We talked about BPA, we talked about dioxin. Possible autoimmune disease. This is a big one, okay? Autoimmune diseases, all of them, celiac, lupus, they all have a connection to infertility. So what might be the treatment would actually be helping her heal from her autoimmune disease. We talked about city tap water, hormonal imbalances with the thyroid. That can happen as well. If you have hormonal imbalances with the thyroid, it can be difficult to get pregnant. Of course, hormonal imbalances with estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, we talked about that a little bit. Possible scar tissue on the cervix from past abortions, that can be difficult to get pregnant. Fibroids and cysts, STDs, there's a couple STDs that can lead to infertility, specifically pelvic inflammatory disease. Possible Lyme disease, okay, this is interesting. So the data with connection between Lyme disease and infertility is very new, but what they're finding is that they're showing that some women are actually passing Lyme disease in utero to their babies. Yeah. And also, for women who have Lyme disease, it can be difficult for them to get pregnant, and they're more likely to miscarry. So that's also kind of an interesting place, and this is very new research, but that's an interesting place to look as well. Food sensitivities, allergies, and then abnormalities with the structure of the uterus. I had one client I worked with, her uterus was like a heart shape, it was like that. And she would have miscarriages and all kinds of problems. And then healing the emotional trauma, healing the trauma from sexual trauma, from having miscarriages, from having past abortions, healing the mother wound. This is a big one, the mother wound. Because what can happen is if a woman has the mother wound, she didn't feel loved by the mother, or goddess forbid the mother was abusive, what can happen is a lot of emotional, energetic things can happen. She can have the thought of, oh, well, I wasn't mothered, so how am I going to know how to be a mother? Or, goddess forbid, I'm like her as a mother, or I don't know how to do this, or even what can happen, it can be an energetic thing of she doesn't feel fully loved up herself, so she doesn't have enough love, enough energy to actually give it to a new baby. So that's a big one. The mother wound, trauma from the divine masculine, trauma from the father, trauma from a prior partner, that's also a big one as well. Because what's important is a woman's body needs to feel safe in order to get pregnant. So if there's something happening either energetically in her current partnership, or something that happened with her father, or something with her prior partner, she's going to hold on to that and maybe not feel 100% safe. So that's important to heal that, so her body can feel really, really safe. And then difficulties in the present intimate relationship. So again, does she feel fully safe, fully seen, fully felt, fully met in her relationship? If she's not feeling that with her current partner, it might be difficult for her to get pregnant. I have a client right now who is struggling to get pregnant, and at first I was kind of like, okay, well, maybe it's some trauma with the mother, and we went through all that. And what I realized as our work together progressed, that what was happening is there were serious issues in the marriage, in the partnership. She didn't trust him. She didn't trust him to be there for her, to fully support her. And that was making it difficult for her to get pregnant. And opening up to the energy of receiving and resting. Oh, this is huge. As women, we're just go, 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 go. And in order to get pregnant, you need to have a certain amount of resting and opening and receiving and trusting. So that's a big one. And opening her up to explore her divine feminine energy. Again, rituals with the fertility goddess. We talked about that, yeah.
When you say opening her up to her divine feminine energy, how would you describe that? What does that look like in your work life?
Yeah, so I do a lot of different things. I do goddess activations. So I'm actually initiated into Yemoja, which is, I didn't really talk about her, but she's also from Nigeria. She's also a fertility goddess. So sometimes I'll do energy activations with Yemoja. I'll also do guided meditations with her. Also dance, movement, truth-telling, sacred truth-telling, and then also somatic psychology. So kind of tuning into, asking her, can you tune into your uterus? What does your uterus need right now? What does your heart need right now? And I can tell you from my personal experience that it's amazing the healing that can happen. I mean, before I went down this journey, I had no connection to my uterus. My uterus, I didn't even feel my uterus. And now I can actually tune in and be like, and I can listen to my uterus and I can be like, oh, my uterus needs this right now. My uterus needs that. She needs to rest. She needs to heal. She needs this crystal. She needs to move the body in a certain way. So bringing her into that connection with her body more through somatic psychology and energy healing and all that can also be a really, really powerful way. Yeah. And, oh, yeah.
Queen of Doula, you read her book?
No, I haven't.
Oh, she talks a lot about that. Queen of Doula's book. Has anybody else read it?
It's not. I can't read it because you have to.
It's
like shit. Yeah. So it's like
I can't. I still haven't finished it.
Yeah. I'm like.
She has another book that goes up to healing too. I don't have the name of it, but it's an easier. I mean, it's not step by step.
Yeah, that's how the Sacred Woman book is like.
Is it Heal That Soul?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, she talks about like talking to the room and like journal
Mhm.
writing,
Yeah.
and like it's emotional. You will
Yeah.
cry through it,
Yeah.
and it might take you a long time. I think it'll take me like a year to read it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like 12 drinks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, thank you for that. Yeah. It's really amazing and beautiful what can happen the more that you connect with your uterus and your reproductive organs. I mean, I share, like I had no relationship to my reproductive organs before, and now, like when I'm ovulating, I feel it and I know it. Like my energy changes, I feel it. So, a woman can make huge strides in order to develop connection to her reproductive organs. And then it's great too to have that relationship, because the more she's in tune with her uterus, the more she can be like, ooh, I think I'm ovulating, and then try to get a little something, something. So it's good. And releasing guilt and shame. So this one's huge, especially if she's had an abortion. There can be a lot of guilt and a lot of shame around that. So helping her release that. Conscious relating techniques. So conscious relating techniques between her and her partner. So different ways of working Kundalini energy, working with the chakras, so she can feel safer and more seen and more felt and more meant in the partnership. Co-creating the baby together through baby spirit work. So actually inviting the baby into the partnership and calling in that baby. Petitioning the ancestors for their help and their support, creating an ancestor altar. Removing negative thoughts and limiting beliefs around fertility, and then teach her about self-care. So again, self-care is really related to the energy of resting and receiving and all of that. So, okay, so let's talk about some final thoughts here. So, the first thing that I want to say is women deserve better. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. Women deserve better. These options that women have in Western medicine are not effective, are dangerous. Do not work with a woman's body. Don't give her the opportunity to heal trauma. And oftentimes, when women go through these procedures, IVF and IUI, they end up feeling more disconnected from their body. They end up feeling like, I don't understand my body. What's wrong with my body? It creates a us versus them. And actually, we are our bodies. We are connected to our bodies. We're in relationship with our bodies. And then one thing that I want to know is, how come women who are already pregnant have a whole holistic model of midwifery and doula work already beautifully set up for them? But women who are struggling to get pregnant, they don't get a holistic model. They don't get one holistic model. I mean, yes, acupuncture is an option, right? But acupuncture wasn't developed originally for fertility. It was developed for the whole body. It's a whole body healing system. So women struggling to get pregnant, they don't have their one healing modality, their one healing system, and I think that's wrong. And women struggling with infertility, I would love it to not only see these women to be more apart, more connected to the general birth, pregnancy, baby world, because there tends to be this really strange divide between, and it's very strange, because motherhood and families happen when you have the feeling in your heart. That's when it first starts.
And be around pregnant ladies.
Yeah.
If you want to get pregnant, hang out with pregnant ladies.
Exactly. Like, see yourself as a mother already. See yourself as a part of that world. Yeah, and for whatever reason, it's a very strange divide. And also, women struggling to get pregnant, they have very specific emotional, mental, energetic, and spiritual needs. These needs are often different than women who are already pregnant, and they're often different than women not trying to get pregnant at all. And we need to start understanding the unique emotional, mental, spiritual, and energetic needs of women struggling to get pregnant. And I talked about some of the specific ones. Like, a lot of times what will happen is, she'll say, what's wrong with my body? What's wrong with me? She can get pregnant so easily and I can't. What's wrong with my body? A lot of what can happen too is shaming around being a woman. So, not feeling like I'm enough of a woman, or a real woman should be able to get pregnant. So there's a lot of kind of these emotions and these thoughts that are very unique and specific to women trying to get pregnant that are different than women who are already pregnant.
Quick question.
Yes.
Quick statement.
Yeah.
Oh, do you help, what I see is a lot of women feeling that they need to embody this male construct for certain jobs that they have.
Right.
Career paths.
Right.
So for them would be embracing a certain aspect of femininity that they have to let go of in order to be the CEO of something,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Do you do that kind of work as well?
Yeah, the divine feminine energy for sure, and that's a big energy too, because a lot of women either don't know how to connect with that energy, or they just don't have the time to connect with that energy, or it's really foreign. So yeah, that's a big aspect of getting pregnant naturally, is connecting with that energy of the feminine. And then with a Western model of treating infertility, treating endo, treating PCOS, they can lead to dangerous side effects. They're very expensive. I didn't even mention the cost. So IVF is between $15,000 and $20,000 for one round, and you have to remember that the chance of it being effective is less than half. So, like on my Instagram, I have an Instagram connected with my business, and I follow all of these different IVF mamas or mamas to be. And you would not believe how many women are like second round of IVF, third round of IVF, and they're just trying round after round after round. And, we're looking at $40,000, $60,000 here. Yeah.
I had a cousin that did it, and she entered 5 and 2 survived.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, yeah, it's an emotional thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very emotional. It's expensive. It's painful. It's like I talked about, possibly re-traumatizing if you're a survivor of sexual abuse. I mean, think about it, this foreign object by this man, it's usually a man, a reproductive endocrinologist. So yeah, it can be very difficult. And then all the medications, they give you emotional highs and lows, and that can be difficult as well. So it can possibly be re-traumatizing. They aren't that effective. And the thing that I think is the most important is all of these ways that the Western model treats infertility, they're ignoring the reason why. The reason why she developed infertility, why she developed endometriosis, why she developed polycystic ovarian syndrome. I mean, from my perspective, like when I developed polycystic ovarian syndrome because I was holding sexual trauma in my body, point blank. And once I healed that sexual trauma with the goddess Oshun, boom. Now, my testosterone was normalized, the cysts were gone, I'm on a regular cycle, I'm ovulating again. So we need to support women in getting to the root cause of the why. And this is a question that Western medicine doesn't really care. They don't care the why this happened. And fertility clinics, they need to stop. They need to be a little bit more upfront about the success rates. They need to not sugarcoat things a little bit, and they need to stop some of their predatory motives and their predatory ways that they're because they know women are vulnerable and sad about not getting pregnant. And like I said, some of these fertility clinics are using incorrect statistics and incorrect data to promote their services. And then the last thing that I want to say is I'm hoping that everybody here today will be a catalyst for change. Now that you know something about holistic fertility, if you meet a woman who is struggling with infertility, you can talk to her about some of the emotional and the spiritual aspects. You can ask her, I know this is sensitive, but, have you experienced any pain or trauma in your life? Have you had abortions? Do you, how are you running your energy in the world? You can start the conversation with women and start to be a catalyst for change. So the last thing that I want to say is this is what I do with women. I take them through a guided process to help them get clear and heal the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects of infertility. And you have my information here if you know of any women struggling with infertility. And then I'm thinking about actually offering a training session in my modality. So if that's something that you would be interested in, potentially training women in the future and taking them through this process to heal the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of fertility, then get in touch with me. And thank you so much for listening, and I'm open to any questions. Yeah.
Do you do this for women without fertility problems?
For now,
You just have.
I just have PCOS or endo. Yeah, for now I'm focusing on women who want to be mamas. But yeah, maybe in the future I might do it also for women who just have PCOS and don't want babies, or just have endo and don't want babies. Yeah.
Are you in San Francisco or Oakland area?
So I do a combo of in-person and Skype. So I have one session where I do in person, and that's where I do the spiritual cleaning with the goddess and some of the goddess activations. And then over Skype, we do the goddess activations and healing all the mental, emotional, spiritual blocks and getting clear on what's happening in the physical body. So it's a combo of in-person and Skype. Yeah.
Where are you located?
Well, for now I'm in East Bay, but I'm thinking about moving back to Marin. So in the future, clients will meet me in Marin for the in-person. Yeah.
Are there any? I'm sorry. Are there any crystals you could recommend?
Yes, absolutely.
bring
So
them?
yeah, absolutely. Unakite is great for fertility. It's very sweet, very loving. I have actually a big piece of unakite, and it's a pink green crystal, and if you can get a big piece, like a big palm-sized piece, and actually put it on the uterus, that could be really fun. Another great crystal, just to connect to the sacral chakra, is orange calcite. I love orange calcite. I have a really big piece of orange calcite. It can feel really nurturing, really supportive to put a really big piece of orange calcite on the body. And then rose quartz, of course, is a really great one for heart chakra. And then there's one called chrysocolla, which I kind of like as well. And that's spelled CHRYSCOLLA, I believe. Yeah.
Good enough.
Yeah.
Was your training mainly through self-study, or did you take a program?
Self-study, because they don't offer anything like this. Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of, I was in nursing school for a spell, so I have a little bit of a medical background, and then a lot of it is just healing that I've had to do on my own. Like I said, I was diagnosed with infertility myself, and I had to go on this journey with the goddess Oshun. So, yeah.
I just have a question. The calling on ancestral spirits and goddesses, is it lineage specific, meaning someone who is a descendant of the reindeer, Russia, Norway, would you do work with that person to call those specific ones, and then people who are descendant more from West Africa, let's say, would be more Oshun, or does it not matter?
Yeah, so I hear two different questions there. So one of them is the ancestors. So the ancestors, I work with their ancestors, whoever they are, whether they're Jewish or German or Swedish or Nigerian or whatever. So that's the ancestor work. And ancestral work, every different indigenous spirituality, whether it's an indigenous spirituality from the Sami people, like in Norway, Sweden, Finland, or the Celts, or the Norse, or all of the African spiritualities, even in China, like Shintoism, they all worked with the ancestors. So this is just a general indigenous spiritual practice that's open to everybody, is working with the ancestors. So that's the first answer. The second answer is, you were asking about goddesses. Mm-hmm. So what I do in my personal practice is I tune in psychically, and I connect to which goddess is right for them. So the way that works is different people have different connections to different goddesses based on ethnicity, or based on affinity, or based on interests. And so for me, I have a connection to a lot of different goddesses, but I have a connection to these Nigerian goddesses. Now, I'm not Nigerian, but I have an affinity to them. So I'm initiated, and I work with them because I have that affinity. So it's really about who the client has a connection or affinity, and then sometimes it is ethnic as well. So for example, I have a client now who's in Canada, And I thought we were going to work with Aphrodite at first, actually. I was like, connect to Aphrodite and like all in. And then Aphrodite was like, actually, no, like I'm not the right goddess. And then Venus like came out. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then it was so cool. So then like Venus like was like, no, it's really me. And then I found this women's clothing store a couple days later called Venus, out back in the Temple of Venus. And I was like, well, hello. Like, of course it's Venus. So yeah, I mean, it's a certain element of like connecting to that woman intuitively, energetically, psychically, and kind of being, okay, yeah, it's this one or it's that one. Yeah.
So nosy question around that.
Yeah.
So when you say that you're initiated, did you go through a process of initiation with an elder?
Yeah, so this happened a year ago. This happened September of last year. I was initiated by a man named Chief Solagladi Popola, and he is a Nigerian Babalawo. He's based in Nigeria, and he comes to the U.S. quite a bit, and he has a couple of his temples here in the U.S. So he has a temple in Phoenix, big one in L.A., big one in New York. So, yeah.
So your affinity with Seoshun came from your work with the shaman or in your own?
Yeah, so that I'm happy to tell you.
Please, I need to know that.
Okay, yeah. So, okay, so I told you guys I went to nursing school for a spell, right? And it was awful. I hated it. So I quit nursing school, and then I was kind of like, oh, what's next? So I had a reading by a man whose name is Tata Kondelo. He's an initiated priest in Palo Mayombe. Palo Mayombe is an African diasporic religion, originally from the Congo, and it's worshipped a lot in like the Dominican Republic and the Caribbean because of the transatlantic slave trade. So I had a reading with him, and he told me a lot of different things about my life, but he told me two things that are kind of relevant to this story. The first thing that he said was that my path was open if I wanted to practice any of the African diasporic religions. And then the second thing he told me is that I had some type of hormonal imbalance and problem with my reproductive organs, and I should go to the doctor. So this happened December 2013, February 2014, I went to my doctor to get, and actually, I kind of intuitively knew I had PCOS. But so I had that reading in December 2013. And after I had that reading where he said, oh, your path is open for one of the African diasporic religions, I said to my ancestors or spirit guides, God, whatever, I said, well, you know, if this is my right path, if the path is open to me, then put an ethical, knowledgeable, compassionate practitioner, elder in my path. And 2 weeks later, I met my first elder. And my first elder introduced me to a priestess of Oshun in Los Angeles. So that's how my path with Oshun and with the Orisha started. With that.
I appreciate you sharing that.
Priestess. Yeah.
I would just say, from a personal standpoint, since I was 18, I was diagnosed with PCOS, and not one physician or doctor I spoke with tried to address my nutrition, tried to address emotional and spiritual aspect of my life. They just always threw birth control at me, synthetic hormones at me, and so I just chalked it up and said, I'm never going to have kids. That's just the way it's going to be. And then maybe a year ago, I said, wait a second. Let me see if I can research some things on my own. So I sought out an acupuncturist who specialized in reproductive health. And when we first met for our consultation, we sat down for 2 hours. And the first thing she said is, what are you eating? And I said, this is what I've been looking for, you know, the entire time. So I really appreciate you sharing this information. And this is something that I'm going to look into for me personally.
Oh, good. Yeah. Get in touch with me if you want more information. That's something that I didn't talk about today as much, but that is definitely a legitimate way to heal naturally from PCOS, is eating foods in a certain way to regulate the hormonal cycle. So eating certain foods that are estrogen promoting in the first part of your cycle, and then the last part of your cycle eating foods that are progesterone promoting. So that is a way to kind of naturally regulate. And there's a woman named, you probably know this, the book Woman Code by Lisa. Yeah, and she has a TED Talk too. I don't know if you've seen her TED Talk. Yeah. You might want to look into that if you're interested in the food aspect. But yeah, absolutely for PCOS, there's a way to eat to regulate the body. And then of course, eating foods that don't promote estrogen in the body. So taking a herb like tribulus, which helps lower testosterone, and then taking foods that are, because there's, interestingly enough, some foods promote testosterone in the body, so taking foods that are lower.
Yeah, those are things that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I consider myself to be, fairly, conscious and self-seeking person.
Mm-hmm.
But, just thinking of, other women that I know and, some of the communities we serve, a lot of, low-income women, is we're not all as aware of our body and the changes going within our bodies, and the food we're eating, and the emotional stress we're carrying and harboring.
Yeah.
So you really have to make like a spiritual and conscious effort to seek out some type of change.
Yeah.
And it took me, 10, 11 years to do that, which is a long time. So it's definitely a process.
Yeah, and you can give that back now to your community. Now they know more about naturally healing for PCOS. Like if you felt called, you could have like a clinic in Oakland or, wherever, San Leandro or whatever, and just, because I feel like women need to know this. Low-income women, middle-income, all women, women of color, white women, like women need to know that we actually have the power to heal ourselves. And that's a really powerful message. So if you can share that message, and share what you've learned and what you're still learning, I mean, that's going to be a huge gift. Especially coming, from a beautiful African-American woman to another African-American woman, that's going to be a really powerful message. Yeah.
And it's perfect doula behavior. That is something that could be a doula subspecialty.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Doing some more, working with folks before they're pregnant, and then when they're pregnant,
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful continuity of care.
Absolutely.
And it is about, remembering what our grandmothers told us. Like, food is our first medicine, right? You are what you eat, right? So those things were true then, they're true now.
Yeah.
We shouldn't get mystified with the medication
And especially if you as a doula can offer some of the, I was talking about it, some of the emotional stuff, the mental stuff, the spiritual stuff, because there are home birth midwives that offer fertility help, right? But they don't go into the emotional stuff. They don't do the goddess rituals. They're not healing the sexual trauma with the somatic psychology. They're at a level, right? And that's fine. But if you can go a little bit deeper with clients, I mean, that's going to be an amazing offer for women. Yeah.
Looking at the deep spirituality of being a birth worker.
Absolutely.
If we have one more question, then we have to wrap up.
Yes. Yeah.
So you said all beans are promote estrogen, or just chickpeas? Because on your list it said chickpeas, but when you were speaking, you said all beans.
Yeah, so beans are slightly estrogenic. The jury is out with soy. There's some research that shows that soy promotes more estrogen in the body, and some that says it's less. So the jury is out with soy. But beans are slightly estrogenic. Really, the big one is getting rid of the dairy. Dairy is highly estrogenic, so if you have endo, if you can ditch the dairy, I know it's hard to do, but if you can ditch the dairy, that's like huge.
Okay, because there was like, they'll only eat meats that are like grass-fed or organic, but if people can afford that, but they couldn't afford beans, that are a source of protein.
Yeah,
Is it, okay.
So if they can't afford the good quality meat, just eat the beans. Because like I said, it's slightly estrogenic, but also beans are really healthy in general. So the more of the concern is the dairy. That's the big one.
If I may interject, I think the big concern with soy is that we want to make sure that that's not GMO soy.
Yeah, that's a big
The
one.
majority of soy in the country, unless it says organic, is GMO.
Yeah, I agree with the soybeans. I'm talking about black beans, legumes.
Yeah. I wouldn't, I mean, in this scenario, if she can only afford beans, I would say go for the beans. Because those are a great protein source, and they're cheap and healthy. So, yeah. I think we have to wrap it up.
We do have to wrap it up.
Okay, thank you.